Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. So this Shvetashvatara-Upanishad which contains the teachings of Śvetāśvatara, someone who had the direct experience of that which he teaches. And that's why, even though the questions that we are studying were not directly addressed to him, they were addressed by all the different scholars sitting in the group to each other. Eventually he stands out amongst all of them, because all of them are scholars but did not have an experience. He, as a practitioner of Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed path of yoga, had that experience. And that is why, towards the end of this text, in the 6th chapter, he is then identified towards the end as the teacher of these teachings. It is yoga, the practical aspect of yoga, which gives us the practical experience of what is being talked about in these ancient Upanishadic teachings. Yet, and that's why there is always, particularly today in Indian spirituality, with great masters like Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Nisargadatta Maharaj, who became enlightened while rolling beedis. You know, those Indian cigarettes. And many more. These are just 3 of the great names, who were completely illiterate, had not received any education. Ananda Mahima, how can we forget that? Forget her, whose temple is there in Haridwar. And she, despite being completely illiterate, the greatest scholars of Banaras, of Rishikesh, of Haridwar, used to come to her and just bow down in front of her and would call her Ma, Ma, just as a child. Even my teacher from Kailas Ashram, the 10th head of Kailas Ashram, he was a great, great fan of hers, as was my father, both of them. So, and the idea is that these teachers are so great because without receiving any education, any second-hand knowledge, they spoke what they experienced, what they felt. And that is why that they stood out. And such great mystics have been the beauty of this country from extreme antiquity. Yet, there has been a stream of thought within Advaita Vedanta itself who cautions a little bit against relying too much and absolutely on experience itself. Now I'm just talking about the other side of the picture, because right now in the spiritual world, because of these influential masters, and I'm not saying they were great masters, really great masters, yet there is so much emphasis only on experience, or in believing in someone's experience. Having one's own experience is something very different. And believing in someone else's experience without yourself actually having it is something else. And that's why this emphasis on having experiential understanding in any way mars or suppresses our critical analysis, our tendency of questioning, then there is a problem. With that much, I have a problem. And I think it was already the Buddha. Just recently because I'm going through the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses of the Buddha from the Pali Tipitaka. I started with the Digha Nikaya, with the long discourses, but they are really long. So at some point I thought, okay, first middle length discourses. So then, and there are beautiful discourses, recorded discourses by Bhikkhu Bodhi available online, which one can hear as an introduction to this beautiful collection of teachings of the Buddha. He's an American Buddhist monk, Theravada Buddhist monk. In any case, so I was going through this Vimamsaka Sutta, which is about questioning even the Buddha, questioning and carefully, critically analyzing the Buddha. And just think, today there is this tendency of, why do you question the master? And the Buddha, on the contrary, he is asking his disciples to actually approach him and question him, and not only question him, but test him. The idea is that critical analysis, what is known in the Upanishadic teachings of Yajnavalkya as manana, critical analysis. By the way, this comes in the with three words: Shravana, listening to the teachings; Manana, critical analysis of the teachings; and then Nididhyasana, then experiential understanding through the practice of yoga. So it's part of these three. And even though they originate in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, I have seen later Mahayana Buddhist works using Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, these three, very extensively in their Sanskrit literature as well. So even Mahayana Buddhist masters very much emphasize on these three. Manana versus critical analysis versus experience. Both are two types of testing what we have heard, what we have received from others. This should be first, because this is easier to do. Just logically thinking, does this make sense? Is what the teacher said, is what the Buddha said, is what the Upanishad say, does it really make sense? And if it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, then what's the problem? Is it my limitation, or is it a limitation in the teaching? All these types of questions have to be asked openly, boldly. And then, of course, eventually comes Nididhyasana, experiential understanding. But the masters over the years, they have placed tremendous analysis on this, tremendous emphasis on critical analysis, because sometimes they say that even direct experience can be misleading if there are some preoccupations which have not been carefully removed. Preconceptions, not preoccupations, preconceptions. Preoccupations can be removed through the practice of yoga. So then you are totally focused. There are no engagement in other things. But what about, okay, so no preoccupations, but what about preconceptions? if you have some very strong preconceptions, then sometimes even the direct experience can be misunderstood. There is a possibility of it being misunderstood. And that is what Sarvajñātma Muni, the grand disciple, the disciple's disciple of Shankaracharya, tries to show through a story of, this is the story that I want to tell you. It's the story of someone who was named I always make this mistake. It's a childhood mistake. His name is not Bhurchu, but Bharchu. Bharchu. He would have most likely been a historical figure at the time of Sarvajñātma Muni. He's the prime minister of a kingdom, of any kingdom back then in India. And as these courts used to be centers of tremendous intrigue and politics, even though he was a very beautiful soul, a divine soul, and deeply loved by the king, he had many enemies in the court. One day, as he was traveling abroad, the other people of the court who were his enemies, they hired some killers, hitmen, you can call them killers, and they asked him to kill him while he's on his way. Now the leader of this squad of killers knew that this is not a bad person. So he went to him and he said, well, you see, I have been given this task of killing you, but I know that you are not a bad person. You won't harm a single person at all. So I really feel bad in doing my job in this case, even though all my life I have done this job. But today I really feel bad. So I just can't kill you. I'm sorry, I can't kill you. But so I'm leaving you, but you have to promise that now you are going to some other country and you will just continue your journey. You will never come back. Bharchu thought, okay, if that's the cost of remaining alive, then why not? And so he went and he didn't come back, because he said that if you come back, then they will kill you. And then we won't be able to save you. So this is really your last chance. And so he went into another country. He lived in other countries for many, many years. In the meantime, the king was informed that your beloved prime minister has been killed. He was very, very sad. And all that happened. But after many, many years, Bharchu had become a mendicant, a sannyasi, a swami, with long beard and long hair. And one day as he was getting old, he missed his birthplace. And he wanted to come back. So he started traveling back. He came back. But he did not want to enter the capital, the citadel, the fort. So he just continued to live in the forest, as is the case with these mendicants. He lived in the forest. One day somebody recognized him. Out of these intrigue makers, one of them recognized. They said, oh, this seems to be Bharchu. Oh my God, if it is found out that this is Bharchu, then we will, it's the end for us. And then so what they did is that as the story started spreading that there is this saintly person living outside of the citadel in the forest, and slowly the local people were going to take blessings from him. Now they could also not go and kill that person. So now what to do? So they went to the king and they said that, do you know, Bharchu has come back, but he has come back as a ghost. And he he wants to kill you because he's so angry on you. And the king said, oh my God, the king really believed now those people. So, but he wanted to see for himself, so he went on those ramps, as they are called, of the citadel. He saw that saintly person there, but since he was told that this is a ghost, he decided not to approach that person lest he will be killed. So now you see, direct experience is there, virtue is being seen, but because the preconceptions are there in his mind, that direct experience is not strong enough to remove those preconceptions. So then what has to be done, that after a few days, he again saw him. Now, as he was living in the forest, he did not have enough food. In a month or two, the story goes that he really started losing a lot of weight. And after a few months, when he saw him again, the king saw Bharchu extremely lean and thin. And then he critically thought, he said, do ghosts also become lean and thin in the absence of food? That's not how ghosts are supposed to be. There is something fishy here. There is something wrong here. And then he actually approached him, and then he recognized his best friend, and the one that he was now frightened from. And this comes, in fact, in the context of the story, that sometimes individuals are, this is a common theme even in Buddhism and also in Advaita Vedanta, abhaye bhayadarshinaha, the ones who see fear in the state of total fearlessness, those who are frightened from entering the state of total fearlessness. So, just to show that how sometimes our preconceptions even if there is some direct experience, they can be misleading. And that's why critical analysis, even after some direct experience, is essential. The point is that a person should still continue to question even one's direct experiences. Just to, the masters say, sthuna nikhana nyaya. You know, earlier, even today, if you want to bind a buffalo or a cow, then what is that called? That, a stake, yes, which you have to hit into the ground, you know, and then you move it a little bit just to see whether it's strong enough. And if it's still moving, then one more. So that's how critical analysis should be used, even against one's own direct experience. That is what they call sthuna nikhana nyaya. Okay. Just to tell the other side of, because there is usually always so much emphasis on direct experience, but there is also another side of the picture, that even that direct experience, forget about questioning someone else's direct experience, that should be done at any cost, but even our own direct experience should be tested with an open mind. That's the idea. Okay, so the discussion that we were having last time, the place of I tried to show how Brahman and Īśvara, pure consciousness, and the concept of God are different, and how why Vedanta says that the concept of God is a limiting concept. It's a limited concept. It is a concept with limitations, and that's why ultimately even that concept has to be transcended. Now, this verse, the verse that we were studying, the first one, the second part of this first verse, Adhiṣṭhitāḥ kena sukhetareṣu vartāmahe brahmavido vyavastham, the translation of which is presided over, by whom do we live? Do we live this? By whom do we exist in pleasure and in the other? If we would have had only pleasure, then we could have said that we are the creator of our experience. But there is something else also involved. Otherwise, why is there the other also suffering in our respective situations? This respective situation is the translation of the word vyavastha, of which respective situation is only one possible translation. Vyavastha can also mean respective situation. Vyavastha can also mean arrangement. And like in Hindi also, when we say, what are the arrangements here? Then we say, yahan ki kya vyavastha hai? Those who know Hindi, they can easily identify with that. So vyavastha also means avastha. Avastha means we means respective, avastha means situation. So our respective situations, the question could also be, from where does this arrangement of pleasure and pain come? Who arranges pleasure and pain? Why is there suffering? Or vyavastha can also mean journey. It also means journey in Sanskrit language. So how do we journey through life, through this world? So the masters have explained this in three ways. The next verse, the second verse, talks about the different possibilities that they considered. And when none of these possibilities made sense to them, then the third verse points out that they went into the meditative states. That's what dhyana yoga, the word dhyana occurs there in the third one. Te dhyana yoga anugata apashyan. And when they went into meditation, they saw that energy, that shakti, that potential, which is present everywhere but hidden beneath the three gunas. Beneath the three gunas. Now it is this, I will come to the second verse, but before we start this discussion on the different possibilities of nature, time, destiny, chance, the five elements, I want to, because still the idea of the discussion that we had in the previous session is fresh in your mind, and we are still, most of us are the same group. So I just want to introduce this idea right now, because otherwise I would have then again to explain the whole thing later on when my listeners, most of them would have changed at least. So fundamentally, the Vedic view of creation is that creation arises out of a dance of consciousness and energy. These two things. Consciousness, pure consciousness, is what we referred to as Brahman, and energy is what we refer to as Maya. And yes, sorry. Okay. So creation arises when energy dances or starts to dance in this static ocean of consciousness. That is the idea of the Upanishads. And last time, if you remember, we talked about these three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma as the creator aspect, Vishnu as the sustaining aspect, and Shiva as the destroying aspect. These three are not only active on a grand scale. In this view, they are active on every scale, which means that everything that is happening requires these three energies to be constantly at work, which means constantly things are being created, constantly things are being sustained, and constantly things are being destroyed. These are parallel processes going on in this universe. And this is very much part of also yogic practice. And what I mean by this is that, for example, when a person practices pranayama on a higher levels of pranayama, which are known as sagarbha pranayama, which means pranayama that contain meditation in it. Literally it means pregnant pranayama. Sagarbha means pregnant pranayama. That the kind of pranayama which contains meditation in it. First of all, a person starts with agarbha, non-containing pranayama. Pranayama is a practice. Then gradually meditation is introduced into it. Then what is done is that puraka, the breathing in, is seen as a manifestation of Brahma. And in fact, the practice goes that a person meditates on Brahma in the navel region while inhaling. And then when sustaining the breath, kumbhaka, then one meditates on Vishnu in the heart region where the breath is being sustained. And then eventually, slowly and gradually, as rechaka occurs, which means as exhalation occurs, then the yogi meditates on Shiva in this region. So constantly also here, creation, even in every breath, creation, sustenance, and destruction is happening. The very source of our, we won't be able to live for a single moment without these three activities. And similarly, on the whole physical level, this is happening. And that is why masters also say that these three awareness should also be introduced into our asana practice. First of all, the focus is to go into the asana. Already that requires tremendous effort to actually go into the asana, and then to retain that asana, to remain in that asana for a longer period of time. That is more, it requires a lot more practice. And then comes the last stage, how to come out of it, but not fall out of it, like we all do, because we are at the end of our strength after a few seconds, and then we just collapse. But advanced practitioners do all these three with total awareness. So even when they come out, it's totally controlled. So that's the introduction of these three principles in every asana. When every asana is done with awareness, that's why we say that then asana itself becomes a prayer. Okay. So here we have Brahman, pure light, universal consciousness, which is consciousness as defined as totally contentless, thoughtless, pure light of consciousness without anything to illuminate, as light would be without anything to illuminate. if there is light, but there is nothing to illuminate. That is the first state of pure light. And then, last time we talked about Īśvara, which can be understood as universal intelligence. So this is the difference. One is pure consciousness. Brahman is translated, and should be properly translated into English as pure consciousness, while Īśvara is universal intelligence, which contains the knowledge required to create, to sustain, and to destroy. But for this, Maya has to be into the picture. This is tremendously important. The capacity, the potential to know, to think. From where does it come? It's a capacity. It's a potential. From where does it come? It comes from potential. And that's what Maya as Shakti means, a potential. So the fact that Īśvara has the potential to know and to think, it comes from Maya, which in the Vedic cosmology is inseparably present within Brahman, as explained by me last time. And that's why many of the Vedantic masters, they say that Shiva Shaktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Shaktah Prabhavitum. If Shiva is capable to create, it is only capable of doing so thanks to Shakti, thanks to the potential. Without that potential, without that energy, there is no movement at all. And creation arises out of movement, out of spandana. And there will be no spandana in pure consciousness without energy, without Shakti. Spandana, movement, is not possible. Thinking, knowing, is a very subtle psychological activity, but it is an activity, it is an action, it is a kind of movement. And this movement won't be possible. So if you say that Īśvara is all-knowing, if you believe in God and say that God is omniscient, God knows everything, then that knowing there is only possible because of the potential of Maya. That is the idea that Vedanta has. Now to proceed further, sorry, yes?
What is the grammatical meaning of Īśvara?
Of Īśvara, ruler. Īsh means to rule. So the question is that what is the grammatical meaning of the word Īśvara? Īsh, the Sanskrit root, means to rule. So Īśvara, Vara could be the supreme. So Īśvara would be the supreme ruler, the ultimate ruler, the ultimate sustainer of everything. God. That's why this word Īśvara is translated as God. Yet so many modern Advaita Vedanta masters also translate Brahman with God. But that is where I find that tremendous confusion has set in. Because the goal of Vedanta is therefore not God realization, which is what we hear everywhere. God realization. It's not God realization. If at all, then it is now what word do you want to use? Because, and when the devotional traditions attack Vedanta, that the Vedantic traditions are so egoistic because they say we are God. Aham Brahmasmi, I am God. They are very correct in their criticism, as long as this misunderstanding is not clarified. You see, even in Advaita Vedanta, if someone says I am God, that is seen as a demonic quality. All the demons in the Indian mythology, they thought that we are God. We are capable of doing everything. We are God. That's what made them Ravana, Hiranyakashipu. They said, we are God, worship me. I'm the king of your country, worship me. And that's what happens in many countries. It's even happening now. where then you start worshipping an individual, a king. He becomes like really the supreme ruler, a kind of god of that country. So that's demonic tendency. But here the Vedantis are not saying I'm Īśvara. The Vedantis are saying I'm Brahman. I'm that which unites me and my creator. I'm that ultimate essence. So there is some difference which those criticizing don't see. If it would be directed on this, it's perfectly fine. That's what Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, non-dualistic Vedanta also says. And the same thing, this misunderstanding prevails everywhere. Why was Mansur al-Hallaj, the great Sufi mystic? He didn't say, I'm Allah. He said, Anal Haq, I'm the supreme truth. But it was misunderstood and he was brutally crucified. Meister Eckhart, the church wanted to burn him at stake, but then he died before this could actually be done. But he was one of the greatest mystics. But again, completely misunderstood. Because religion does not see this deeper aspect of the mystical traditions, where they create some distinction. Even though Īśvara is nothing than Brahman, everything is Brahman. But Īśvara is still a limited concept in it. And this is that state of awareness in which there is no limiting concept at all. All limiting concepts have been transcended. Okay. Now, as long as Īśvara is there, there is tremendous wisdom, knowledge, omniscience is there, but there is still no desire. What the next thing then happens is now Maya again comes into the play. And what Maya does, Maya makes Īśvara forget its true essential nature. So that's the veiling aspect of Maya. And when Īśvara forgets its true essential nature, which is complete, Purna, in which there is no craving, no desire, no need, no creation will be there. Creation can only follow when the next stage comes, that we forget our true nature. We feel that something is lacking in ourselves, and then we require something else. And it is when this veiling aspect of Maya comes that desire arises. So again, even in the next step, this is the Advaita Vedantic cosmology. So in the next step, even in the next step then, Maya has to show its veiling aspect, and then you get, as the next step, you get Brahma, the creator, divinity, where this desire to create arises for the first time. So when that desire, the potential of having a desire was already here, but there was no desire here. The moment desire arises, Īśvara is then referred to as Brahma. So it's basically the same thing, but just different stages of procession, of progression are being referred to by these various words. So when actually desire arises, then it is referred to as Brahma, or sometimes also the word Hiranyagarbha is used. Hiranyagarbha, the one with gold in his womb. And gold in this case refers to light. The one that has light in its womb, which means who is ready to give birth to light, which then creates everything. So there are these, it's part of it, the word Hiranyagarbha is also found in the most ancient collection of teachings. That's the word that is used for Brahma. Hiranyagarbha samavartatagre. In the beginning of this creation, the first entity that arose was Hiranyagarbha. So that idea of Hiranyagarbha is explained in Vedanta like this, in which arose desire, in which was the seed of the mind. This is the creation hymn. The creation hymn is a very interesting hymn. First of all, it's part of the most ancient collection of teaching. So that means around 150 BC, so 3500 by the latest dates. And it has generated tremendous interest amongst even Western philosophers as well as scientists, even scientists. In fact, Carl Sagan in his voyages, Cosmos, yes, voyages. I remember because I with tremendous fascination, I looked at the documentary, and in a few places he actually quotes this creation, this hymn of creation. So the point is that now it is no more thoughtless pure consciousness. It is no more that peaceful intelligence in which the three gunas are totally balanced, but now rajas has started to dominate. And when rajas has started to dominate, then desire arises. And then that desire to create arises. When rajas becomes dominant, then you refer to the same. These are all just forms of, except this. This is energy. This is consciousness. This is a manifestation of consciousness. And this is a manifestation of consciousness. Ultimately, everything is one consciousness. But this is just different words, technical terms that are being used by the masters. So then when that desire of creation arose, then the first thing that the Upanishads say, that consciousness created was light. So tadaikshata, there the desire arose. Bahusyam, may I become many. And then what happened? Tat tejo asrijata. It created light. Light is what makes us aware of division. Just imagine a world without light. Will there be multiplicity? Even if it would be there, consciousness would never notice it. So, the moment at night, everything is one. Everything becomes one, just pure darkness. But then the moment the sun rises, again, all these divisions. So this is what the other day I was asked whether Big Bang. Are you here? Yes. So this would be now the Big Bang moment of the Vedas. And in fact, the way the creation hymn really describes it is very much, the language is very much like that. That then the rays of that light emanated into all the different directions, above, below, and horizontally as well as vertically. That's how tirashchino vitato rashmiresham adhasvidasit uparisvidasit. So the light went into all the different directions. So the description is very similar. And there they say something, that three things gave rise to this impulse. Forgetfulness of one's true nature on this level, avidya, the veil of ignorance, desire to create, the second thing, and the third thing, the samskaras, the very subtle impressions from the past circle of creation. Those samskaras, those subtle impressions, they then give rise to this new cycle of creation. This is how, so we are not talking about the first moment of creation. We are simply talking about a first moment of creation of this universe. But like this, there were many, many infinity, because like there is spatial infinity in the understanding of Vedanta, there is also temporal infinity in the understanding of Vedanta. Even though it believes in the moment of creation, temporal infinity in the sense that this creation, this cycle of creation is just one cycle of creation. How even time in this is created. So space in this is created. In this. So in fact, this is very similar also to dream, because in the night when we fall asleep, we create new bodies, new lives, new creation. Every night we create a whole creation of our own. What happens there also precisely these three things happen. First of all, the person has to forget his true nature completely. We have to forget, for the dream to come into existence, we have to forget that I am peacefully lying in my bed. So we have to forget our true nature, and then that's the first thing, the veil of Maya. The second one is the mind really feeds on thoughts and ideas. The mind would cease to exist if there would be no thoughts and no ideas. So it continues to create something on its own. So that's why then it creates. So it has that desire to retain itself. That's why even in dream it continues to create. And then come into the picture, the forms that it takes are defined by what Freud calls residues from the previous day. These residues come up, what in Advaita Vedanta we call karma shesha, the residues of the actions and experiences we have had in the previous day. And they decide, they have the influence on the kind of creation we create every night. So the same thing is happening on a universal scale in the universal intelligence, in the understanding of Vedanta. Just to show the parallel. And I was amazed. I mean, when you look at this, whenever I think of the scientific descriptions of Big Bang and then the creation hymn of the Vedas as this burst of light lying at the very origin of this creation, it was I think in February maybe, when the Telegraph, which is a very famous newspaper, its online version on the internet, that's what sometimes I read, I came across a video of the moment when the sperm meets the egg. And it's like this. I was amazed to look at that recording, that video, that it gives off a burst of light. An actual burst of light in that moment when a new human is conceived. And they have actually recorded it. You can check it. So this is amazing how even at the very beginning of our human existence as an individual, there is actually a physical burst of light taking place. So whenever I meditate on these hymns, that always that video straight away comes to my mind, which is an amazing video. However, then coming on the level of Brahma, where this, so for the one who asked me about whether Brahman was before Big Bang or not, Big Bang occurs parallels between mysticism and science should be drawn very carefully. Particularly, I as a scientist, I as a mystic have no authority on science, so I don't feel myself confident enough to draw such parallels. But still, on a superficial level, there seems sometimes in the language tremendous similarity. In fact, there was one journalist who took out sentences from the writings of great scientists, great consciousness philosophers, psychologists, and mystics from different traditions, mixed all those sentences together and took them to the scientists, mystics, consciousness philosophers and psychologists, and asked them to identify their own sentences. And every one of them totally failed. This is how similar the language becomes. So, On this level then, when the desire to become many arises, then the first thing that occurs in the understanding of the Upanishadic understanding is that Hiranyagarbha, Brahma, divides itself into two. So that is really, if you would see, it's a parallel that first of all, with the union of Maya and Īśvara, this single cell known as the zygote is produced. Then the first thing that it does, it starts dividing itself. These ancient masters, they did not have the capacity, at least no external capacity, to look into the womb of the mother to see what's happening, but their descriptions are again tremendously similar. That they say that that the moment that desire to create multiplicity arises, and when it's no more content with being alone, then it becomes of, first of all, united, one, and the description is that this Brahma, this is the description from the Upanishad, where it is described as a man and a woman in total embrace, where they are totally one. That's how Seji Yajnavalkya, he describes. Sahaita Vanasa, he became like two in a tight embrace, which means even first of all one, and that one divides itself, but still totally in a tight embrace. And that is how the masters, they describe it, and then they say that eventually they become these two parts. These two parts then, they create many. From two, so how from one multiplicity arises. This is how the masters try to explain it. Often I think the idea came to them from the seed. If you look at the seed, most of the seeds, they have two parts. So one seed, but within it has two parts, and from them, so they would have thought the same thing that about the human origin, that like those two seeds, two parts of the seed, first of all it divides, and in fact as the seed grows, it actually separates those two parts, and from that then the tree grows. So the same thing they must have inferred happens to the human as well as in the creation itself. So that's on the level of Brahma, and that's why this word for husband and wife in Sanskrit language, pati and patni. Pati means husband and patni means wife. Both are derived from the root pa, which means to protect. Protecting each other, to protect, to guard, to foster. That word is used. But the example that Seji Yajnavalkya there gives is ardhabrigala. Ardhabrigala, which means two halves of a split pea. And then like a chickpea or any pea. And then from that, this multiplicity arises. So this is the idea that the Upanishadic masters, the Vedic cosmology, or you can call it Genesis of this creation, from one consciousness, it's this process which then becomes into many. And as you could see, that the law of karma on this level plays already in this understanding a very central role, and it is in this context that this question is being asked. Coming back to the question that by whom do we live in pleasure and in the other? From where does this arrangement of pleasure and pain come? Is it God which, and if God is a loving God, then why do we suffer? The answer here is that we suffer due to the karmas, due to our own actions. These actions, they propagate creation, as well as they lead into suffering. So the arrangement is the result of our own karma sheshas. In fact, the idea of Īśvara as an organizer is simply as an indifferent or transcendental rain cloud which showers down the water equally on all seeds to give them the environment in which they can express themselves. And depending on what kind of seed it is, if it's the seed of a mango tree, then there will be sweetness. If the seed is the seed of a bitter gourd, then it will be bitter. A neem seed will produce the bitter taste. So even though the water which is falling down from the cloud is exactly the same water for all. It's not that the neem tree, which is completely bitter, is given bitter water by the clouds, and the mango tree, which is so sweet, there it's given sweet water. It's the same water for all. So the work of God is simply to provide the environment in which individuals can express themselves according to the samskaras which have brought them into that state. And remember that these samskaras, they are not written on stone. They are the results of our own actions. And that's why by performing different kinds of actions, they can be undone, they can be overcome. So they are not like a destiny, that this is because this is a predestined destiny. But that freedom to express oneself and make wise choices, make positive choices, make yogic choices is in this way. There is some determinism as well as room for free will. So you can also make choices, but there is also something determined for yourself. But because what it is being determined by are the results of our own actions, we can also do something to change that to a great extent. And that is where yoga comes into the picture. That is why taking a noble sankalpa of helping others, of cultivating positivity, of cultivating universal kindness, of cultivating compassion, of cultivating forgiveness comes into the picture, because that gives us the possibility of changing those karma samskaras. So this is how the whole idea of creation and yogic practices, they are deeply interconnected. Okay. With this, I think now in our next session, we will look at the various possibilities which those who, particularly because now he wants to bring up, he's the first Upanishadic master amongst because this is the 11th Upanishad, the 11th Upanishad which brings up really the idea of Īśvara, God, very clearly. Before that, most of the Upanishads are just concerned with Brahman, pure consciousness, and the experience of that. All these three, they don't matter much to the 10 Upanishads. For the 10 Upanishads, it's just this, and experience this, that's all. Not much discussion about these three things. This one discusses these three things. This one discusses creation. In the earlier Upanishads, what we hear, if there are here and there some creation stories, then what the masters say, well, they are just to make you aware of the vastness of Brahman in which that creation arises. The point is not to tell you about creation, but just to understand the vastness of this pure consciousness in which this vast creation, just to make us aware of how vast this is, just that's all. But it is in this Upanishad, in the 11th one, which is out of the 10 principal Upanishads, that now the idea of God, Īśvara, is very prominently. And so then it starts by bringing up also the idea of the atheistic traditions. Some of them who would say, well, it's just time. If you give enough time, then things arise. Or it's just the nature of things to be produced. Or it is destiny. It's just destiny, that's all. Or it is chance, mere chance that everything happened to be. Or it's, well, these 5 elements, the way they come together, they give rise to consciousness. So these different views, which were very predominant, in fact, extremely predominant in ancient India. Lokayata, they were known, those who are widely spread amongst the common people. These views are first presented. The masters, they discuss them. And when they don't reach a conclusion, the reason is also briefly given why they don't reach a conclusion. Then the idea of meditation and going into oneself for meditation, in finding an answer to this question comes. This is how the story of this Upanishad then unfolds. Any questions?
I don't know, maybe I go to those. When you say Brahma, you come to, from Brahma comes to.
Yes, from Brahma comes to. That's what they generally refer to as Manusha. Yeah, so his question was that when Brahma becomes 2, then what are they referred to? So generally there is another word for those 2, Manu and Shatarupa. Manu is from where the word Manava, Manushya, humanity. But Manu is not seen only the forefather of humanity. Manu is seen, in fact, before he becomes the forefather of humanity, he becomes the forefather of the entire animal kingdom. If you look at Upanishad, the way the story unfolds, he first becomes the forefather of the entire animal kingdom in the Upanishads, and then in the end, he becomes the forefather of the human kingdom, and we call ourselves then Manushya, human beings. But in reality, all beings are Manushya. All beings are children of that Manu Shatrupa when they become totally distinct to the Adam of Eve. You could say the Adam of Eve of the Vedic traditions. But again, Adam of Eve have this very strong human aspect, which does not exist in in later Hindu religion, yes. But in the Upanishads, no. In the Upanishads, as I said, Manu Shatrupa are also the parents of all living beings. So, but that is where after Brahma, Manu comes in fact from man, to think. The moment this capacity to think. So that, and Shatarupa means the one with 100 forms. So she takes on these 100 forms and consciousness just follows it into these 100 forms. Dogs, pigs, elephants, goats, all these 100 forms, and just consciousness follows it. Manu follows it into all those 100 forms till eventually comes the human form.
Is it the same name for Pashupati?
Pashupati is very different now. Pashupati is very different. What I just really focused now on one line. But from here, from our previous discussion, you remember that you could continue on that side with Vishnu and Shiva. So his question was, is this the same as Pashupati? So no. Manu Shatrupa, they are not same as Pashupati. If you go from Brahma, Vishnu into Shiva, yes, Shiva is Pashupati. And why Shiva is Pashupati? That's again a different story. Pashu, the word for animal, has the meaning of pasha. Pasha means bondage. Bondage of ignorance. So anyone that is bound by ignorance, even a human being, that's why the Sanskrit word for animal is freely used for human beings also in the Vedic teachings. Many times, Manushya Pashu, the human animal. As long as that bondage of ignorance is there, that lack of self-awareness is there, everyone is a Pashu. And Shiva is the Lord of the teacher, the master of all those pashus. That's why he's referred to Pashupati. That's again a different story. Any other questions? No other questions? Can we conclude then? Okay. Sorry, yes, please. I was waiting for you. You're also most welcome to do that. But as you like, whatever you prefer. If you usually, when you ask questions, everybody benefits. So unless you have a very specific reason of not wanting to ask it in front of others, then. Yes.
What is his name again?
That his name I don't remember. Yes, that is just somewhere what I read in somewhere. It just came to my mind. The one that I was talking about was Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan is a great scientist. He's a great name, cosmologist. Yes, a great cosmologist, and he has produced these beautiful documentaries known as The Cosmos, which are really worth watching because they really give us a sense of the vastness of this universe. So that's Carl Sagan. That was Carl Sagan. He was not a journalist, but the journalist I don't remember. Sorry. Let us conclude then. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. My humble salutations to you. Namaste.